Let's go over some arrays today. We're going to teach you what they are, how they work, and how to create them, and how to use them with the users. So on line 18 is our first array, and how we know it's an array is these two little brackets right there. So those brackets are going to be beside the data type, and then that's how we know the variable array is an array. So what an array is it holds multiple values of the data type that you create the array with. So in this case, the variable array is an int, so it's going to hold multiple integers. So it holds 0, 1, 2, 5, and 23. And how we access those numbers is we use what we call a subscript. So in every programming languages, numbers start with 0 and it goes on from there. It doesn't start with 1. So how we access 0, 1, 2, 5, and 23 is we're going to say the name of the variable, which is array, put these little bracket things up here, these little square brackets, and inside the square brackets, we're going to put the subscript that we want the value of. So subscript 0 is the first position, subscript 1 is the second position, and it goes on from there. So this array holds 5 values, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we only counted to 4, but remember we're counting 0 with us, so that's going to be 5 values that this variable holds. So we want to access the value 0, so we're going to put the subscript 0 in between those square brackets, and we're going to run it. So this array starts at position 0. So now let's show you 1, and we're going to run it again. Now this is going to be the next value, which is going to be 1. Position 1, and we're going to show you 2, and this is going to be position 2. And now let's access 23. So that's going to be the last position, which is subscript 4. So we're going to put 4 in between these square brackets. We're going to play it. So position 23. So it's technically position 4 and subscript 4, but this value is going to be 23. So let's create a new array. So in creating an array and initializing those values, you don't have to use the keyword new, because you're already giving the variable array that holds the memory 0, 1, 2, 5, and 23. But let's say you want to create an array and not initialize the array. So we're going to say int double square brackets to make sure it's an array, name the array shots made, and we're going to say equal to new int square brackets 3. So this 3 right here is going to be the size of the array. Up here, when we initialize the array, it already knows the size because we gave it the values. But when we don't give it the values, we have to tell the array how many values it's going to hold. So in between these square brackets at the end here, before the semicolon, we're going to put the size of it. And then in this case, it's going to be 3. And so when we type the new keyword, it's going to allocate 3 memory spots that the variable shots made is going to hold. So just remember, when we don't initialize the array, we have to use the keyword new, and we have to give it a size. So let's use that variable shots made. So we created a scanner object to read user input, and we're going to ask for shots. So we're going to ask player 1 how many did they make, player 2, and player 3 how many did they make. So when we do that, how we initialize each value, we're going to use what we call subscripts like we did earlier. So to initialize the first value in the array shots made, we're going to use subscript 0, which is the very first value. So we're going to ask how many shots did player 1 make, and then we're going to read in the next integer. But we're going to make shots made square brackets 0, which is the first position, equal to the next integer that the user inputs. And then how many shots did the second player make is going to be 1, but that's actually the second position, and we're going to read in that int, and so on. And then the final position. So once again, you can see here we have 1, 2, 3. But like I said, it's read from 0. So it's going to be 1, 2, and 3. And I'm sure you already realize that the last position in the array is going to be the size minus 1. So in this case, it's 3, but the last position is going to be 2. So we're going to run it here. How many shots did player 1 make? We're going to be 5, and that's going to initialize the first value in the array. How many shots did player 2 make? They made 5 as well. How many shots did player 3 make? They made 5 as well. And now we're going to display the shots. So as you can see here, we have player 1 made 5, player 2 made 5, player 3 made 5. And right here where we display the shots, this is how we use the array values. So we're going to print out player 1, and then we're going to say shots made square brackets 0. So this is going to be the very first player that the user inputted. Once again, the first subscript and the first value is going to be 0. So we're going to say square brackets 0, and then the next player 2 is going to be 1, which is the second value, and then the player 3 is going to be 2, which is the last and third value. So we're going to use an array with a for loop. Because we are talking about arrays, you should know what a for loop is, and this is going to be a little more advanced, and so it's going to be less lines of code. So traditionally, when creating an array, we always try to create the size and make that a final variable. That way that array size never changes. If we have a large program and that array changes, then it can mess up a few things. But if we make a variable final and make it where it never changes, we can say that the array is always going to be 3 or whatever we set it to. So in this case, we create an int, do the square brackets beside the data type to make sure that's an array, name the array, and set it equal to new, that allocates new memory, and then we're going to say int and initialize the size of the array. So right here in the for loop, we're going to ask for the players. So you can see here, index starts at 0, and as long as the index is less than the size of the array, which is number of players, we're going to increase index and ask for the free throws of player 1, 2, and 3. So you can see here that since index starts at 0, we don't want to ask how many free throws did player 0 make, because that would make no sense. So we're going to say index plus 1, because it's only going to go up to 2, and it's going to ask for player 3 at the very end. But since index starts at 0, we can also initialize each value in the array free throws made. So you can see here that we're going to initialize the index 0, and then it's going to run it and test it, and then it's going to increment index by 1, and so it's going to be index 1 now, and it's going to increment index again by 1, and now it's going to hold the last value 2. So we'll run it here. So how many free throws did player 1 make? Now we're going to say free throws made index at 0 equals the next integer put in. So we're going to say 5. How many free throws did player 2 make? Once again, it incremented index by 1. So this is going to be 2, and this is going to be 1 now. So they also made 5, and so on. And now index gets to 3, and it's not going to be less than, so it's going to stop and get out of the for loop. So now we're going to show the players using another for loop. So you can see here that the index starts at 0, and the number of players is the size of the array. And we're just simply going to go through the array, and we're going to show each value. So since index starts at 0, we're going to show the first subscript, which is 0, and that's going to be value 5. And it's going to show the second, and then the third. So once again, we do use index plus 1 for the player, because player 0 would make no sense. So one thing arrays do have is it's called bounds checking. So you can see here that we initialized a double array called bounds checking, and we initialized it to a size of 3. So if we try to initialize the fourth value in the array of bounds checking, which it doesn't have, then it would throw an error. And I will show you the error. So right here, bounds checking 3, that value does not exist because remember it only goes to 0, 1, and 2. So we try to initialize the third subscript but be the fourth value, it's going to throw an error. Let's get past this first. And I will show you. So right here. So exception in thread main, array index out of bounds. So that's how we know somewhere throughout the program you are trying to initialize a value in an array that is too big. So let's move on to the length of an array. So since arrays are objects and not actually variables, they have different methods and they have different variables inside that object to help the user control them. So when creating an array, each array object has a variable inside of it called length. That's how we know how large that array is. So up here when we made free throws made, which is right here, we're going to try to figure out the size of that array. And what we do is we create a variable called array length, and we set it to free throws made dot length. So when we use the dot operator in free throws made, which is an object, it's going to give us a bunch of stuff that we can use. So it's going to be methods, and it's going to be variables. And one variable inside is called length. And it does get the length of the array. So we're just going to compute a simple average of the free throws made by each player. So we're going to say int average equals 0 and int total equals 0. And we're going to print out the array length right here. So I'll show you the array length, which should be 3. So we're going to run it real quick. And then get past all this junk. All right, so you can see here 3. So we print out the array length on line 72, which is in fact 3. And you can see up here that it is the size of 3. So let's use a for loop with that array.length. So this also helps a lot when dealing with for loops and arrays. So we're going to say for int I equals 0, I is less than free throws made dot operator length, and we're going to increment I. And this makes it where we can never mess up the length of an array because it's always going to hold that value. Whether we change it or not, it's still going to hold that value. So we're going to say total plus equals free throws made, and since I starts at 0, it's going to go to 0 to 1 and then 2 because 2 is less than 3, which is the size of the array. And it's going to add all those values up in the array. And then after the for loop, we're going to say average equals total divided by free throws made dot length. So we know that the size is going to be 3, so we can use that with the average. And then we're going to print out the result of average. So you can see here that we made player 1, 2, and 3 all have 5 free throws made. So that's going to make it the average of 5. So the average is 5 below. So you can see how everything works with the array. And that wraps up the basic simple structure of an array. Let's go over the structure one more time before we end the video. So once again, array holds multiple values of the data type you made that array of. And how we know it's an array is on line 18 here, we have the double brackets. If we get rid of those double brackets, it's going to throw red squiggly lines, and we don't like those. And that's because the one variable cannot hold multiple values, but an array can hold multiple values. So just remember that this array variable is actually an object, which technically means, which this is about to confuse you, but you will get it later, that it doesn't hold the actual values, it holds the memory addresses of those values. But when we create an array and we already initialize the values, we can just say in between these brackets, 0, 1, 2, and 3, 5, and so on. And we can separate those values by commas, and it has to be in between brackets. But when we don't initialize the values of the array, we have to use the keyword new, which allocates new memory in Java, and it gives it new memory of the size that we made it, which is 3. That wraps up arrays and how to use them with for loops and stuff like that. If you have any questions, post them in the comments.